I'm excited today that Josiah Fogle is on the podcast. Josiah is an author and entrepreneur who believes in uncovering opportunities within every person and situation. With a genuine passion for coaching and inspiring other people, he dedicates himself to helping individuals to achieve their goals. Drawn from a diverse range of experiences across various business industries, Josiah has cultivated a unique perspective on what it takes to succeed as an entrepreneur. Driven by an insatiable love for learning, Josiah continually seeks personal growth and improvement. His unwavering commitment to progress is only matched by his desire to motivate and coach those around him, guiding them toward reaching their own aspirations. A self-proclaimed Renaissance man, Josiah's dedication extends to his own family, where he leads by example for his three strapping boys, his little princess, and his all-star wife. Josiah, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being on the show.
Welcome to Catalytic Leadership, the podcast designed to help leaders intentionally grow and thrive. Here is your host, author and leadership and executive coach, Dr. William Attaway.
I would love to start with you sharing a little bit of your story with our listeners, particularly around your journey and your development as a leader. How did you get started?
Yeah, so to go all the way back, I had a really, my dad set a really strong example for me growing up. He was a missionary in the Philippines. And one of the things, like I have a very vivid memory of one, we would do this a lot, but one evening in particular where my dad he was a teacher. And so he, didn't use his hands all the time, but he loved to use his hands when he could, and like for manual labor and things like that. And so we were on this massive campground that always had work to do, and always needed gravel on the roads, needed things chopped down, needed all these different manual tasks that there were people to do it, but he always was like, cool, I'm done with my studies, I'm done with preparing, I'm gonna go do this. And he would always invite me or my siblings. And I remember one evening in particular, my dad was like, I come? And I was like, sure. And so we go down and we're shoveling from this massive rock pile, and we're putting it in a wheelbarrow, then going down the road, filling in a pothole, and then we go back, put it in, and then it's getting dark, and I'm like, it's like 6 o'clock ish, and in the Philippines it's always dark at like 5:30 is like it's light, 5:30 it's dark, and so it's like starting to get dark out, and I'm like, I'm hungry, I'm tired, and my dad's still going. I'm like, Dad, are we gonna go? Like, are we gonna go back to the house? It's almost dinner time. And he's like, no, there's still more potholes. And we worked there for another probably about half an hour, and it was like we could barely, like, until we could really not even see what we were doing.
Wow.
And so that for me, I remember that, and I'm like, man, that was such a powerful teaching moment that he used for me. And so that's kind of where it started. And then it sort of evolved. A mentor of mine told me I should do this crazy internship thing called Southwestern Advantage. And this is where I kind of I cut my teeth on sales. So I had no idea what it was, but a mentor of mine said, you're going to do it. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to grow a lot. You'll make some money to pay for college. And I was like, cool. I like all those things.
That's right. A win-win.
And so I reached out to the company and kind of submitted my information, which they don't really get a lot of those because it's a door-to-door sales thing. And I got a call from one of their area directors, and basically was like, hey, I'm doing it. And he was like trying to sell me on it. I'm like, dude, I'm good. I'm in. I want to do it. And he's like, are you sure? It's like, it was kind of weird, but anyways, but that ended up being a 3-year long venture that I did when I was in college that kind of taught me the value of perseverance, how to sell, how to take rejection. When you knock on over 20,000 doors, you learn a little bit.
Just a bit.
And so, yeah, I think that's that was a big part of my learning too. And then I think another big thing there was when after my first summer selling books door to door through Southwestern, I recruited a team my second year and my third year. And I actually got an award for this that kind of unheard of, that 100% of my team both years stayed the whole summer.
Wow.
And normally the retention rate's 30% at highest. And so I had 100% both years, and people were like, what are you doing? Like, and I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just loving on people. I'm just loving on my team. And I want them to know that I care and that I'm going to help them. No matter if they have a great sales day, no matter if they have a bad sales day, I'm here to serve you, here to support you. And it was powerful. And I look back on that. I don't think I realized how strange that was in the time, because it just felt normal. And so it's been a helpful thing for me to reflect on further in my career now, of like, okay, cool. Just remember that was what you did there was really powerful. And so it kind of is a guiding rock of like, love the people you're with, and make them feel like they're, no matter how they're doing, that you care. Now, some of those people I probably should have sent home because they weren't really actually selling. But that's a different story. So that's some of the foundational things. Obviously, there's a lot more in between there and here. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of a context for where some of my learnings come from.
Just, one of the things that I hear a lot in the people that I work with is the challenges of retention. When you have team members who, are feeling like they're just a cog in the machine, they're not really valued as a person, they're not really seen as a person, they're just seen for what they do. They are very quick to move down the street, very quick to hop from job to job to job. What you just shared about 100% retention rate in an industry that I would not think a whole lot of people are lined up wanting to jump into. 100% retention rate for 2 summers, like that's a significant deal. And I think what you just talked about, how you loved on them, how you saw them as actual 3D human beings and wanted to add value to them. That is such a lesson that any leader can take and apply no matter what context they're in. I would imagine that's something you have carried into other environments, including the one you're in now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's so important to, you hear this all the time. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's just so true. I literally, the other day, it was actually literally yesterday, I was talking with a team member on our team at Story Builders, and we have weekly one-on-ones. So that's one of the systems behind the relationships is one-on-ones. And I was in our one-on-one and just kind of slowed down and was like, before we dived into KPIs and before we dived into like where things were at and how he was doing and how I could support him, it was like, how are you doing? Like, how's the family? How are the kids? Yeah. And, it ended up being a little bit of a rabbit hole, but it was a deep rabbit hole that let him know that I care and let him know that I'm not just here to push KPIs. I'm here to support him as a whole person. And it just was I frankly, it was almost routine for me to slow down and ask.
Yeah.
And I was like, when I want to ask, I was almost, it's kind of sad for me to say this and acknowledge it, but like, I almost was taken back at like, oh, wow. You need to remember there's everyone's got a deeper story and there's things going on in life that I'm not going to see unless I slow down to ask. And so even though it was sort of on routine, it's like, I think this is like whenever you have a habit, sometimes you don't even realize the power of that habit until sometimes you catch yourself and you're like, oh, wow, that's powerful. So that was a very, real thing. And it's, I try to, I'm obviously not perfect. And there's relationships I've not done well with. but having that habit of slowing down, the one-on-ones, the systems behind it, have been priceless, I would say.
One of the challenges that I see often in the entrepreneurial community is a difficulty balancing home and work. And you're married. You
Mhm.
have 4 kids, 3 boys and a little princess that I mentioned in your bio earlier. How do you do that? How do you balance the need to drive forward in what you're doing vocationally, but not neglecting those relationships that matter most?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge that a lot of people face. I think there's a couple things I would say. The first is making sure that you prioritize the relationships in the right
Mm,
way.
yeah.
For me, it's my wife is at the top, and that communication, while not perfect, again, is important. And so us being on the same page is huge.
Yeah.
There are times in when working, when you need to flex and you need to work longer hours, and
Mhm.
if you do that without communicating it, oh man, that's a recipe
Right.
for disaster. So I'm sure you and everyone listening is like, oh yeah. But so that communication is so key. But then also, like, really setting aside time to invest into the family. Like we do,
Mm,
like when we have family trips, when we do things as a family, I try my absolute best, and I turn off anything I can, to stay focused and make sure I am present. Like one of
mm,
the things that I like to say to myself, is be here now.
yeah.
Kind of like a little self talk of like, be here now, and only be worried about in this moment, like who you're with. And so that's another thing I like to do. But another powerful thing is setting your actual like family goals and family vision, as well as like the business vision and goals. Um, because if you only set business goals, like those are the only things on your mind, and you don't even have any context of like, what am I trying to do with my family? It's not
Yeah.
just a wife and kids. It's like, no, what are we trying to accomplish as a family? And so that's, obviously my kids are younger. I mean, my oldest is just turned 7 in July. And so, um, we're navigating how to bring them into like a family charter type thing, into our family vision and values and goals. And it's a work in progress, but it's definitely something that we have started and intend to continue to grow.
I love the
So
intentionality of that. You're not just thinking one day you're going to wake up and everything is going to be like you dreamed it would be. You're intentionally working toward it.
yeah, I think that's with a lot of things, whether it's running a business, operating a business, being in any role. I think the intentionality
Yeah.
is what is needed. And I think when you look at A players on a team, like that's what you should be looking for. And I
Mm,
think that, and I'm just, going back to the sales team that I managed in Southwestern, like I think that I instilled that in them of like, why are you doing this? And
mm,
they weren't necessarily there to make money. They weren't there even to, like they weren't there to be the best. They were there to be part of the team.
mhm,
They were there to gain like life experience from going door to door. They were
mhm,
there to hope that, to try to make money, but it was like it was the third. It wasn't the first. It was like they were there for the team and the experience
mm.
first. Um, and so I think just when you have your priorities and focus aligned, it makes everything clearer.
Mm.
It's so easy, and you probably get caught in this too. Like I catch myself in this a lot, where you go through a week and you look back and you're like, what did I do this week? Like, like what happened? I filled the time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the time just kind of evaporated, but was it focused? Was it intentional? And I think when you have like your goals set, when you have things that you're aiming for, and when you have those priorities, it guides you. It guides you towards focused, intentional work. And so at least one of the things that I like to do is really think through my priority and focus for the day. Like, what is my priority and focus for the day? If I could do nothing else today, what's the one thing?
Yeah.
And then if you take that and apply that to like the week with our leadership team at Story Builders, we do that. Like, what's the one thing for this week that we want to accomplish? And then if you take that for the month, you take that for the quarter, take that for the year, it's like, it really does help crystallize where you're going and the roadmap to get there.
So good. When you align your longer term goals, your quarterly, your annual, even your 5-year goals, when you align those with what you're doing every day, when there's a direct correlation there, when you see that alignment, and what a motivator that is, and what a catapult that is toward your effectiveness and toward greater intentionality.
Yeah.
Because you're like, man, this is making a difference. And I love what you're saying about predefining what the goal is. I often say, hey, Friday at 5:00, what am I going to want to look back and say, hey, this was a great week.
Yeah.
What do I need to get done where I can look back and say that? That's the goal this week then. If that's what's going to make this a great week, what stops me? Most often, the answer is me. You are the head of operations at Story Builders. What does that role look like?
It's a great question. If you find out, let me know. I'm just kidding. So as the head of operations for Story Builders, I wear a lot of hats. Really, I think that the best way to kind of answer that question is I serve the company, I serve Story Builders in ways that Bill, our CEO and founder, in ways that he's not as strong. So I bring in my strengths of galvanizing the team, of discernment and activation, to a very, very high caliber team. So we have a very strong team in terms of ideating and wondering, and I'm using the Working Genius language. Working Genius, we implemented it across our full team. Yeah. And so everyone takes it, and we talk about it often. We talked about it just on Monday. Yeah. And so it's part of our vernacular. Yeah. And so we looked at a team map, and the missing part before I joined was the activation. And so the team had been a really, really strong team of getting things done, and doing them in a new and innovative way to serve our clients, what we call story partners, in creating and developing their intellectual property, such as books, learning experiences, all that kind of stuff. But every time they fulfilled on that service, it was a little bit different, because there was no person in the middle making sure that the systems, the operations, the SOPs and all that were the same and being used. It's not that people didn't have them. It's just that everyone had their own set of them. And so, so what I do with Story Builders is I'm kind of the alignment. I'm helping bring alignment to the company as a whole, to be able to serve more story partners, and to be able to free up Bill to be the CEO, and to live into that role more, of helping grow the business in that direction. Does that make sense?
100%. Leading from the second chair is so often misunderstood. I think it's seen as a lesser than role. It's seen as a, maybe one day, you'll be the CEO, instead of being seen as what it is, which I think is a superpower. Yeah. I think the second chair is the complement that really fills out and makes possible for a leader to lead in their zone of genius. Yeah. And to use Lencioni's vernacular, I mean, when you're operating in your genius, right, man, there's nothing like it. It's not, you're not just, like getting along in your zone of competency. Yeah. You're not being drained by operating in a zone of frustration. No, you are flying high.
Yep.
And I think second chair leaders need to understand and hold their head high. What do you see as some of the key components to leading from the second chair? What have you learned is so important in that role?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of I learned I've learned a lot experientially. One of the books that I love on sort of the second chair, second in command,
Mhm,
is Cameron Harreld's book called Second in Command.
mhm,
Great book on being sort of the yin to the yang.
mhm,
He calls it, and the reality is being the number two, or the second in command, or the second chair. It's going to be different in every situation. It's going to be different with every leader, because every leader is a little bit different. And so I've actually played this role for quite a few people now. I would say almost like half a dozen different leaders, and been able to come alongside them. And I think that what's what's my like where my strength is that I see the vision, I see the mission, and then I can discern and figure out, here's how we're going to get closer to that.
mhm.
And I do need to remember to stay in my lane, because frustration
Yeah.
of mine is tenacity. And so I need to remember to stay in that activation, and make sure that I'm helping delegate
Yeah.
the enablement and tenacity of a project. But the things that are important are understanding how the CEO or the founder or the number one in the company, how that person's wired,
Mhm,
and what are their strengths.
mhm.
And the reality is, the business that they have founded, the company that they have founded, the organization they have founded, whatever it is thriving, or is actually working
Mhm.
because of those strengths. And it's not growing as fast as it could because they're having to operate in those areas of frustration. And so it's like, how can you get them out of those areas of frustration as fast as possible to enable them to focus more on bringing in new customers? Really, the reality is, it's like, how can you let them, if the sales and marketing is their strength and
Mhm.
they're really good at that, which most founders and CEOs are, like, that's kind of just their natural gifting. It's like, hey, bringing more people in, getting more people on board, then that is, let them focus on that, and then you need to take the things off their plate that aren't that.
Mm.
And so it's really kind of pairing what people's strengths are. Now, there's other people that I've worked with that it's opposite. Their strength
Yeah.
is not the sales.
Yeah.
Like, they don't like the sales. Their strength is the operations and the systems,
Mhm.
and they're like, sales are happening and they're in business because sales are happening, but they're like, I don't want to be on that side of it. Like, sales is over there, they can do their thing. Let's make sure that it's super efficient. And they've got such an efficient machine that can fulfill on the product or the service that they're providing. But the reality is, they could grow 10x tomorrow if they had the right person in that sales seat.
Mhm.
and
Yes.
and for a second in command, it's like, okay, cool. Coming in with the mentality of, I'm here to grow the sales and
Yes.
marketing of this company. Again, the best answer I can give you is, it depends. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
depends on what the real need is.
I think that landscape view that you're describing, where
Mm,
you're kind of looking at the whole thing, you're looking at the whole board,
yeah.
right? You're not just looking at these few pieces. You're looking at the whole board and saying, what is the best way to accomplish the goals that have been laid out,
Hmm.
given what we have to work with, given the resources that we have? Where can we get better? How do we make this better? So often in that landscape view, you have a better view of what Patrick Lencioni calls silos, right? In any
Yeah.
business, any organization, where they are not really all pulling together in the same direction, but they're really focused on their thing. And
Hmm.
their thing is the most
It's most
important thing to
important.
them,
Yep.
even over the business goals. How do you deal with that? How do you keep everybody pulling in the same direction from the
Mm,
seat that you sit in?
that's a great question. I can imagine a couple of people on my team actually who are wired that way. of
Yeah.
like their project is the most important project.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing that I try to do, and I think that works, is letting them believe that. Letting them believe that I think theirs is the most important. And so it's kind of like affirming them in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of like, yeah, you're absolutely like, how can I help? How can I help you? How can I serve you in that? Like, what do you need from me? And then like, it's almost like modeling that support of like that, modeling that I'm willing to serve you, even though it's not my job. My job is not to work on individual projects.
Yeah.
But I'll come in and I'll serve you. And it's modeling that so that they see that, to be able to do that for other people too, and understand, oh wow, Josiah, he's head of operations, but he's willing to help in any way that he can on my projects. Now, I'm obviously going to set boundaries. I'm not going to, get sucked in and like have that be what fills up my week. But I am going to make sure that they know that that's why I'm here. I'm here to make sure that their projects go well. And then it's after they understand that and they fully understand that. And I've seen this actually happen, which is kind of cool. Then it's helping them understand, okay, what about, Bob's projects over here? Like, how can you, with your strengths, help with this? Like, do you see any opportunities? And it's kind of bringing in that cross collaboration. But it really needs to start with them feeling like they are, I don't want to say like the most important, but they're heard and they're seen. And it's like they're valued, because if they feel valued, they want to make sure that everyone else feels valued too. It's kind of like this, it creates this bandwagon effect of we are a team. So I think breaking down the false narrative that like, I just need to get my job done is done by example. Like, I think that as a head of operations, you need to be able to come in. It needs to seem like you touch everything. Like you've got ropes holding everything, but the reality is you it's all delegated. Yeah. Everything is moving, and it to the outside eye, it's like, wow, Josiah runs it. It's like, no, not really. Like, I just have a really cool team. Yeah. Like, I have a really cool team that is in alignment and being intentional with their days and focused on the main goal of like, how do we make the world a better place through story. Like, and that's what we're all about as story builders. Like, how do we tell stories that, and what's cool is it comes back full circle in that, like, in the work we're doing, because, sometimes in the creative space, like, you can get good enough. You can have a good enough product. Like, oh, this is good enough. But our team, like my team, doesn't settle for that. Like, a lot of times I'll get like the pushback of like, I think we can go more. I think we can make this better. And like, that doesn't happen with a team that's just focused on get it done. Yeah. And then that again comes full circle in that the story partner or the client that we were working with, they get the deliverable and they're like, wow, this is awesome. Like, this is better than I thought it would. Like, this is, excuse me. For some of our clients that we work with, we're doing collaborative writing, or some people call it ghost writing. And one of our clients a couple weeks ago was like, this is me, but it couldn't have ever come out of me, but it's me. and he was just kind of blown away at the how the voice was captured in such a powerful way that captured him, and what he was, and the story that he wanted to tell through this book. And then that goes and then brings us referrals. And so it's like, that doesn't just happen. It takes intentionality. It takes, it takes that focus, and that, I guess coming back to the intentionality, I guess you could say that being intentional is catalytic.
Yeah. I love that. The way you're describing the role, it sounds so much like a conductor of an orchestra. Yeah. The conductor is the one who has a landscape view of the entire orchestra. Where all the pieces fit, how it works together. And your goal is to bring out the best in everybody. but the conductor never makes a sound. They're simply drawing the sound out of the
Mhm.
team to make
Yeah.
something beautiful. And that feels very much like what you're doing.
Yeah, it's kind of, as you were saying that, it made me think of, so I played rugby in middle school, high school, college, a little bit after college too.
Yeah.
And actually played for the Philippines under-20s national team, which is a fun
Wow.
fact. But one of my position on the team was the halfback,
Mhm.
kind of like quarterback in football, American football. But I would be the person that connected the backs with the forwards, with like the big guys with the little guys, the guys that would run with the guys that would just like hit. And
Nice.
it was like my job to conduct and make, pass the ball out if it was ready to go out, keep the ball in if it was supposed to stay in. And I never thought about that analogy of that conductor with regards to rugby and like some of the sports, the skills that I learned playing rugby and how they kind of relate to this too. It's interesting.
Absolutely. There's no such thing as a wasted experience. It's so interesting to me how God weaves so many of the experiences of our lives together, and something that doesn't seem connected at all, in fact, positions and prepares us for something so much later. Just you are leading at a different level than you did a few years ago. And a few years from now, your team is going to need you to lead at a higher level still. How do you stay on top of your game? How do you level up with the new skills that you are going to need to have as a leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that I'm going to answer it in a kind of a weird way. I think that there's a certain point where I might not be the best fit for this team. And there's kind of like an acknowledgement that you need to make. And I think it's like, for me, what is my strength in the current seat? Is this current seat, this head of operations, the long-term seat that I'm going to be in? And as we scale, as you scale a company, there's different needs. And there's when you're a $500,000 company versus a $1 million, $3 million, 10 million, 20, as you scale, like the needs are so different. And it's naive and foolish to think that as you scale, and we have plans to scale pretty large, that as you scale, you can still fulfill that same role and that same function to the same capacity. And so I envision a time where Story Builders hires a much more qualified and better, head of operations or COO in that role. Maybe it's me, maybe it's not. But the reality is, you need to be mindful that just because the company is growing, as the company is growing, you are also growing, but the role and the function that you're in might not be the role and function that it needs at a larger scale. And so to set the stage, like I think that's just something to keep in mind. Now, how do I personally grow? I think it was more of your question, but the reality is, I think it's a matter of like always consuming new stuff. Like I absolutely love Lencioni and his Working Genius podcast. That is a very helpful tool. I am very much an auditory learner. And so, listening to podcasts, reading books, the Second in Command, like I mentioned earlier, was a very powerful tool. And then another thing that, we were talking about this offline, attending and going to masterminds and different things that allow for, you coined it earlier, like those mountaintop experiences.
Yeah.
Where you're able to, because you mentioned that sort of that portrait view, that landscape view, the landscape view of like what's going on in the business. But you know what? It's so easy to get sucked in. Yeah. And so mountaintop experiences like masterminds or even like seminars or workshops. I know the Global Leadership Summit's coming up soon. Things like that get you to step back and look at what's going on. Yeah. So I love doing things like that. I love pouring in. That's actually how you and I first met.
Yeah.
was a Global Leadership Summit a long time ago. And
It's been a minute. Yeah.
it's been a minute. Didn't have any kids. I don't think I even had I had a wife. But so consuming content, listening to things. One of the cool things about in my current role is as we're helping leaders and entrepreneurs and business people develop their books, a big part of what they're doing is audiobooks. And so I'm gleaning from those. I love audiobooks. And so as we put a book out, I'm quality control, but it's also helping me grow.
Love that. I love that.
And then
That's awesome.
the last thing I'll say is seeking out like mentors.
Yeah.
Seeking out people who are further ahead on the journey, that can be an example, that can be someone that you can look to and say, I want to be like that in 10 years. I want to be like that in 5 years. I want to be like that in 20 years. Like, that's so powerful. And I think for me, it's one of the things I've always looked for in whoever I'm working with as a number one or as the owner or founder. That was the big draw towards working with Bill at Story Builders. And, he's someone who has a very strong relationship with the Lord. He is someone who has 6 kids, so more than me. And his youngest is like graduating high school, and he's just in a different stage of life that I am, but has been where I'm at and knows what it's like, and also is growing a business. And I'm like, I want to learn not just the tangible business things, but like the life things. Selfishly, I'm almost positioning myself how I want my team members to position, like how I want to position myself for my team members. I want to position myself towards my leader in a way in which I can glean from him. Because the reality is we all get busy, and I think I think there's been times in the past where I've wanted that, but I haven't been intentional in like setting myself up to glean. I'm using glean for intentionally, because the reality is as a CEO, a founder, like there's so many things going on that distract. And if it's not top of mind, it doesn't happen. Yeah. And if it's not something that I am constantly being like, hey, Bill, like, hey, can you show me like how you did that? Like, can you talk to me about this conversation that we just had? Like, can you walk me through that? Like, I think the curiosity towards entrepreneurship, the curiosity towards leadership, the curiosity towards doing leadership well is something that I think is probably one of my strengths, that it doesn't happen by accident. It needs to be intentional. But that's probably the biggest thing that's helping me grow.
One of the things that I've always admired about you since we first met, and it's been almost a decade ago now, is the humility that you approach whatever you're doing. You have a teachable spirit that comes through so loud and clear. And that has been so evident in this discussion. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing and leading from a place like that. I believe that is what truly makes a leader catalytic, when you lead from a place understanding you don't have all the answers. You don't know it all. You're learning too, but you are committed to being a conduit of what you're learning instead of just trying to hold it all in for yourself. You've mentioned a couple of books on the show, on this episode. Before we wrap up, I would love, is there a book that you would recommend, a favorite book that if a leader hasn't read this, you say, man, you got to put this on your list?
Man, there's so many. Man, the one that immediately always comes to my mind first is Never Split the Difference.
Great book.
Yeah. Another good one is Crucial Conversations. Just a good reminder. Yes. And then the one that I read actually on a regular basis, just because it's such a classic, is How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah, Carnegie.
By Dale Carnegie. Like it's just such a classic, and obviously there's little things in there that are it's timeless.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder of putting people first. Yes. And that, like what you said earlier, the 3D, making sure they're a 3D human being. And there's a lot to that.
That's so good, man. I know folks are going to want to stay connected to you and continue to learn from you, Josiah. What is the best way for folks to do that?
Yeah, probably the easiest way would be to shoot me an email, josiahfogel@gmail.com, and we can get connected that way. If you're listening to this and you've heard me mention books or ghostwriting, collaborative writing, or anything like that, feel free to go to mystorybuilders.com and check us out. Check out the website. You can schedule a call there to talk with the team, and we can talk more about your intellectual property, your book idea, anything like that too. So there's two different ways.
Josiah, this has been so helpful today. Thank you for sharing so honestly and so openly. Such generosity that you've put on display today from your story and what you've learned so far. Thank you for that.
Well, thanks, William, and appreciate you and everything that you're doing with Catalytic Leadership. It's been really cool to see this just grow into something that creating ripples, and you really are being a catalyst. So thank you for watching.
Thanks for joining me for this episode today. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, if you don't have a copy of my newest book, Catalytic Leadership, I'd love to put a copy in your hands. If you go to catalyticleadershipbook.com, you can get a copy for free. Just pay the shipping so I can get it to you, and we'll get one right out. My goal is to put this into the hands of as many leaders as possible. This book captures principles that I've learned in 20 plus years of coaching leaders in the entrepreneurial space, in business, government, nonprofits, education, and the local church. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take a next step with a coach to help you intentionally grow and thrive as a leader, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to catalyticleadership.net to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, leaders, choose to be catalytic.
Thanks for listening to Catalytic Leadership with Dr. William Attaway. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode. Want more? Go to catalyticleadership.net.